Excellent. So let me get started. Welcome to our August WEAll talk for, August, essentially. It's on how to talk about a well-being economy. And we're really excited that you're here. If you are coming here for the first time and experiencing our WEAll talks for the first time, every month we have a specific topic that is shared from a member of WEAll, somebody from our team, or an ambassador. But really, we are passionate about knowledge sharing and hearing from different perspectives and equipping ourselves to be able to build this movement. And we want to serve this movement in any way possible. And one of the things that has been demanded over and over again is this topic of how do I actually speak about a well-being economy in my context, and what are some of the challenges around that? And who better to give you that content than Kate, who is our comms lead. She's our comms co-lead and is based in Canada. And I always do this for all our WEAll Talk presenters. So I do want to share a little bit about Kate, so you also know a little bit about who she is. But she's our communications and narratives co-lead. She's got over 10 years experience in strategic and innovative campaigns for organizations in the environmental space and the wellness sector. She's even written a book, which is best-selling. And she's co-authored features in Vogue and Elle and Refinery 29. She's led communications at Green Economy Canada. She's been driving awareness to programs that support SMEs on their journey to net zero. And she is just passionate about transforming our economic system, especially after realizing the negative health it has, not just on our planet and our communities, but also our physical and mental health. So yeah, Kate has traveled the world, but she is back now in Canada, Toronto. And I'll hand over to you, Kate, to share more. I'm going to pin you to the screen so that people can, or spotlight you, so that people can see you properly for the recording as well.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction. And we're so excited with all the enthusiasm around this event. This is the second time that we've held it. And yeah, as Tobli said, our members are always asking, how do we talk about this? And so we thought, why don't we put together a lot of the resources that maybe you've seen before. So like our 5 needs and our 4 Ps. And as part of my work in narrative, we've done some narrative research ourselves. We also have a lot of collaborators who are focused on narrative solely around some of them specifically on the economy. And so we've taken a lot of that research, a lot of our research, and put this together to sort of give you some tools and tips on how to really talk about a well-being economy and how you can set that up. We have a specific framework that we're going to teach, how you can really use that in your own context. And just to let you know, we are working, we do have a Wellbeing Economy 101, which we're going to be running in October. So this one's slightly, as you probably noticed from the description of it, this is more focused on narratives and communications, but it still gives you a bit of a 101, even if you are just a beginner. But for those who are maybe members or have heard of us before, this presentation is really just focused on some of that narrative research and ways that you can set that up and talk about this with your friends, family, or colleagues. So in terms of our agenda, we're going to talk about quickly what is WEAll, well-being economy theory, some narrative considerations. Then we're going to get into the 5 needs, then into the 4 Ps, and some of our policy recommendations. So I will just kick that off, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to pop that into the chat, and then afterwards we're going to sort of gather those and answer them as well. We'll have about 10-15 minutes at the end. All right, so what is the Wellbeing Economy Alliance? So the WEAll emerged in 2017 as a collaboration between academics, NGOs, and activists who recognized that the dominant economic model being followed around the world wasn't delivering for the majority of people, and it was leading to runaway climate change and driving inequality. And then they also help to kickstart something called the Wellbeing Economy Government Partnership Program. WEGO, as it's also known, is a collaborative effort by a group of governments that are committed to shifting the focus of their economies from traditional measures of GDP to broader measures of well-being. And this approach really humanizes or prioritizes human and environmental health, social equity, and sustainable development. So not just GDP. The goal is to have economies that really serve well-being of people and the planet, not just short-term economic growth. So some of these countries include Finland, Iceland, Canada, New Zealand, Scotland, and Wales. And in this presentation, I'm going to be going into some of the frameworks that they use and how that's helped to really shift their policies and create, better serve well-being of people and the planet. But so the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is an alliance, we like to call it an alliance of alliances. We have 15 different hubs around the world, 400 organizational members, 6 national governments I just mentioned, that's part of the WEGO, almost 3,000 individual members. We also have a policymakers network, a lot of academics, and key ambassadors and spokespeople around the world. So here's just a map of where all our hubs are. Maybe you're calling in from one of them. If you don't see where you are on the map and you're interested in starting a hub, we have instructions on that on our website. So how does WEAll aim to or try to push transformative economic change? It's really a 3-pillar approach. So the first is through, and this is not in priority, just narratives. So really trying to change the cultural narratives and dominant ways that we talk about the economy. And then the second is through policy. So we're trying to shift to a new system through policy, trying to get people to implement new practices at an institutional level. And then the last is around power. So this could also be called power bases. And this is where we recognize the power of community and amplifying voices of those and people who are already talking about economic systems change. You know, we want to get that chorus of voices all together because we're working on the same thing. So what is the economy? Well, in layman's terms, really the economy is just the way that we produce and we provide for one another. So people and planet are not really here to serve the economy. The economy is actually here to serve us. So, you know, we shouldn't really need to justify, for example, why investing in healthcare benefits the economy. Instead, we should be saying, like, how does the economy and evaluate the economy based on its contribution to our health and well-being? But the problem is we've elevated the economy for so long that it's just really hard for us to move beyond this economic logic. And here I want to get into some of the research that we found. So why is it so hard to change this narrative around the economy? Well, the problem is a lot of people are really intimidated by it and don't necessarily feel comfortable. So some of the research has shown that only a third of British people feel comfortable engaging with economics. Only 17% think that they have a good understanding of the economy, and most could actually not accurately define GDP. And in some research we found from the from Frameworks Institute, people saw the economy akin to something called like a mysterious black box. You know, they're just really nervous. And this is really unfortunate because when we feel like we're intimidated by something, it means we feel like we don't have control over it and we don't have the ability to change it. But you know, as I mentioned before, the economy is really just made up of people. It's the way that we produce and provide for one another, and we do have the capability to change it. So what are narratives? Narratives are overarching stories and frameworks that provide context and meaning and a cohesive message over time. So this is what we're trying to do. They shape how people understand and interpret information. The aim is to build a consistent long-term message that influences beliefs and attitudes and perceptions. So an example, a narrative about sustainable living that emphasizes the benefits to future generations, to the planet. That's long term. One thing I just want to mention is that sometimes people get things mixed up between communications and narratives. Often communications or campaigns, for example, are time-bound projects with specific starts and end dates. And communications can often just involve different mediums in terms of social media, et cetera. But the differences with narratives is the goal is really long-term. And we really want to, work to shape public perspective so we can guide collective action. So what is the dominant narrative? Well, you've probably seen this before. GDP measures success, or trickle-down economics, the American dream, or wealth is progress and power. And this has been really difficult to change. This is still the dominant narrative, and we do have hope. There's some examples in here of hope that the narrative is changing, but this really is still really prevalent in the media. And there's some research that was done. Happy Planet Index actually presented this, and I love this. But there was a study, and this was just with English newspapers between 2023 and 2024. But they found that GDP is still the main indicator that they were talking about. So second to that is unemployment rate, well, carbon emissions, which is positive, but life expectancy, life satisfaction, and other well-being economic frameworks were not part of it. This was some research done by the Center for Social and Economic Rights in South Africa. Yeah, we thought this was interesting. So in the first figure here, you'll see there was a study done to just see, how do people feel about universal basic income, and what does that support in Europe and South Africa? But when they asked them, what do you think is the single most important thing that a government should be doing? Overwhelmingly, you'll see in figure 2, and this was just South African responses, it was job creation. So second to that is the basic income grant, but there's still, they cited that the response to this was conflicting because of the dominant conservative narrative around the economy that we're seeing. So as I mentioned, we have had some success. We can share this later in a follow-up email, but we've had some hits in The Economist, BBC, and The Guardian, and CBC, but we're still working to try to change that. And what does that economic narrative look like? So it differs a little bit. So success is measured by the quality of life, not just by GDP growth. Everyone has access to resources and opportunities that they need to succeed. Our economy allows our environment to flourish, and citizens are actively engaged in their communities and economic decisions. So how can we, if we're, in our day-to-day conversations with friends and family, or we're maybe putting out a piece of content, how do we want to frame this new sort of idea of what an economy can look like? And there's some strong research around how to do that. This is just a formula, and we're going to be digging deeper into this. But first, what you want to do is really activate shared value. And then second, you want to explain the problem and the solution. And then you want to end with a call to action. So what's really important about this is when we bring in a solution and a call to action, we're really emphasizing to people that they do have control around the economy. It's not something that's out of their control, and it really helps to give them optimism that they can change things. As I mentioned, the economic system that we have is something we created. And it's a system shaped by policies, choices, and actions of individuals and community. So when we promote a narrative that emphasizes this collective power, we can really inspire more people to engage with and shape the economic policies that impact their lives. And something we often talked about is, there's a human behind GDP. There's individuals that are behind our economic system. And maybe you've seen this man before, but his name is Simon Kuznets. He invented GDP during the 1930s and the Great Depression. And he even said himself, the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income as defined by the GDP. So the inventor of it even was really, he warned Congress not to be so actually narrowly focused on it. So he said that a true measure of national welfare should really consider the quality of growth, not just quantity, to provide a comprehensive understanding of economic progress. Another trick in terms of narratives is establishing a common ground. As I mentioned before, you want to activate a shared value. So this maybe your argument's going to start off with stating that shared value. So you might say, well, most of us, or no one wants, we all believe, everyone should have a chance to. This means as you're teeing this up, the person that you're speaking to or the person that's reading is going to see themselves in that. Even if they might have a different point of view, at least when you start off in alignment over an agreement over a value, they're much more likely to listen. So an example of this, no matter what we look like or where we come from, we want families to have freedom to drink clean water, breathe safe air, live in healthy communities. Or we all want to live in a world where everyone has enough to live in safety and comfort on a healthy planet. So this is just something to keep in mind. The last little trick before I get into the 5 needs is using metaphors. And I'll show some more examples of this later, but research found in the Frameworks Institute and Black and Sands that using metaphors around our economy makes it a little more makes them feel a little more comfortable. So saying things like reprogram our economy or update our system or redesign. So for example, we can redesign our economy to prioritize the health and well-being of people. Or we need to reprogram our economy so that it works in the interests of everyone. So actually, one last thing before we get into it is when you do present your argument, try to make connections. So if you're bringing up examples about the economy, maybe connect well-being to social justice and the economy, connect the environment to well-being and the economy. That helps people to see that the root cause of so many of our problems is actually this economic system that we have the power to transform. So I'm going to now jump to, again, if you have any questions on that, or maybe you have some tricks that you've learned in your own research, feel free to pop that into the chat. But in terms of the 5 needs, we have dignity, fairness, participation, nature, and purpose. So I'm going to get into each of these. So we all need dignity. So everyone, the value here is everyone has enough to live in comfort, safety, and happiness. So how do we tee this up? Remember, going back to this, how to frame, activate a shared value, explain the problem and solution, and end with a call to action. So I'm going to start off with a problem. So when we have the cost of, so the cost of living crisis, we want to bring in, we started off with the value here, and then we're getting into the problem. So the cost of living crisis, these are just examples from the UK. You probably have them from Norway or South Africa or wherever you are to bring in these examples. But the cost of living here is just showing how much it's really increased in the UK and London. It's hitting all groups. The cost of living has increased up to 26%, which is quite used. So now continuing the problem and making those connections, what the World Health Organization has found is that 35% of what makes a difference to life expectancy is actually about income, security, and poverty. Can you put food on the table? And 29% is actually around your living conditions. So, we have this problem of cost of living, and then the data is showing it's really impacting our own health and life expectancy. So how can we bring in some optimism around this? So if we look at Iceland, for example, they've been able to really create some new policies that reduce cost of living, created affordable housing programs, And they attribute this largely to creating a new set of framework that really goes beyond GDP. So they're not just looking at growth. GDP is actually only one of 39 indicators. And so the framework is used to measure well-being. They focus on social, economic, and environmental factors. As I said, it's really helped to reduce the cost of living. So putting it all together, what is the value, problem, solution, and call to action? Everyone should have enough to live in safety and comfort. But right now, the cost of living has greatly increased, almost up to 27% in the UK. And life expectancy is falling for people on low incomes because our economy prioritizes economic growth above all else. So, solution and example. We can redesign our economy to focus on what really matters. For example, Iceland uses a framework of indicators, including tackling the cost of living crisis to measure economic success. When you put a goal like this at the heart of the economy, you end up with policies like increasing the supply of affordable housing and ensuring businesses conform to fair work practices. A call to action, you could say, write your elected representatives today or follow us, something along the lines of that. So one of our other 5 needs is nature. So again, starting off with the value, humans are one with nature and we need to give back as much as we take from Earth. So the problem, the climate crisis. So global CO2 emissions is at its record high in human history. And again, making the connections here, but this graph shows emissions are tied to economic growth and rising GDP. This has really impacted the wildlife population that's plummeted by an average of 69% since 1970. The problem is that cleaning up an oil spill might actually be good for GDP. So when that happens, the cost of the cleanup actually is attributed to GDP. So it's not really valuing what's important for us. It's not taking in the cost of the damage to the environment and to people. So by organizing our economy around GDP, we're making policy decisions that end up setting up the wrong priorities. Another key thing to do is bring in quotes or people that are influential that that maybe people didn't even realize were on the same page with this. So, for example, Bobby Kennedy said, gross national product counts air pollution, cigarette advertising, ambulances to clear out our highway carnage. It measures neither wit nor our courage, nor our wisdom, nor our learning, nor our compassion, nor our devotion to this country. It measures everything in short except that which makes life worthwhile. And I'm going to throw in a metaphor here because I mentioned before, metaphors really help. I love this one from Kate Rayworth. If you, she leads Donut, she's the founder of Donut Economics, and she often uses this, but she says, when you go to the doctors, you don't just get your heart rate checked. You get everything looked at, right? You get your blood work done, you get a physical examination. And that's really similar to GDP. Like when we're measuring the success of a country, why are we just looking at one metric when we should be looking at a multitude of metrics? So going into the solution here, and I just want to state that these are all not perfect solutions. Wales and Iceland and other countries that I've mentioned, they're not perfect well-being economies, but they have taken some steps to create different frameworks that go beyond GDP, and they have had some success with that. So Wales is, I think, one of our best in class examples because it was actually legislated. And so this is the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act of 2015, and it aimed to improve the social and economic, environmental, and cultural well-being of Wales. And it was actually created based on public opinion and feedback on how to change Wales. So I thought that was really interesting. The Act actually requires public bodies in Wales to think about the long-term impacts of their decision. So not just GDP growth in the short term. And the aim is to work better with people and communities to address persistent problems such as poverty, health, inequalities, and climate change. They have 7 well-being goals, 46 national indicators. And actually, this is a really neat example. There was a decision to scrap one of the key road schemes because it went through protected wetland. And they thought, okay, well, that could be good for short-term GDP, but because of the act, it didn't have a positive impact for future generations. So it was scrapped. And that actually led to more changes later on, where they ended up boosting money in their budget for public transportation, and reducing the amount of highways. I think that seemed to work well for them. So in summary, we all want to be able to enjoy a safe and thriving natural world, but our natural world is cracking at the seams. Global wildlife population has plummeted. Sorry, if this is pedantic, we just hope that this might help as you're creating your own arguments. Global wildlife population has plummeted by an average of 69%, and we're running out of time to stop climate change. The economic model we've inherited didn't factor the natural limits of the earth. So the solution, we can redesign our economy to prioritize the well-being of people and planet. Example, WEAll's Future Generations Act offers a promising example that is being copied elsewhere. All new policies have to be assessed for their impact on current and future generations, which includes environmental impacts. Call to action, follow us here if you're interested to learn more. So diving into the next need, purpose. The value here is that we all have a shared sense of belonging, and our institutions serve the common good. So what is the problem? Inequality. These are just some graphs around some of the richest 10% income share. And you can see this is kind of across the world. It's really increased from Canada to Argentina to Brazil. Inequality is rising. Making the connection here to well-being. Maybe you've seen this research before from Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, but they found in their epidemiology research that countries that have really high income inequality actually have worse off health, mental health outcomes, and societal problems. So countries like the United States and Israel or the UK might have worse physical health outcomes than countries that are more equal, like Denmark, Finland, and Norway. Bringing in a metaphor. So apologies for some of those who aren't familiar with the concept of diminishing marginal returns, but essentially it's the idea that you get less bang for your buck the more you have of something. So we like to think of it as akin to salt. You need a bit of salt in your diet to bring out the flavor, but if you put in too much, it's actually going to impact your health. And this is the same of GDP. Maybe a little bit of growth is great, but going too far actually has a negative impact. So here's a great graph that really exemplifies this. So as you'll see, as GDP increases, so does life expectancy. But at a certain point, it hits its diminishing marginal returns. So you'll see here, Chile, even though they have a GDP per capita of 15,000, they actually have a longer life expectancy than the US. And the same with South Korea, who again, has less GDP per capita than the US of 29,000, but they have much longer life expectancy at 82. So some of the solutions, I think Costa Rica has been doing a great job of really trying to prioritize the environment and well-being over economic growth. They have a third, 0.03% of the GDP of the US, but they have a longer life expectancy, and they're almost nearing 100% renewable energy. And so actually in Curitiba, it's a city in Costa Rica, they've created new frameworks to really help improve the environment, inequalities, etc. Check that out. So in summary, we all want a sense of belonging, but our growth-centric economic model is leading to eye-watering levels of inequality. Research has shown that economic inequality leads to poor mental and physical health, but again, we want to show that we can change this. We can reprogram our economy so it prioritizes the health of well-being and people over endless economic growth. Costa Rica really exemplifies this approach by achieving high levels of well-being with relatively low growth and prioritizing environmental sustainability. So next, we just have two more needs as fairness. So justice in all its dimensions at the heart of economic systems. I think that's a value we can all agree on. So bringing in the problem here, there's a huge wealth gap. This is in the United States, but between whites versus Black and Latinos. It's on the left one. And then right here, we have this graph highlights the health equity issues. So showing that while Black people make up 17% of the population, they actually accounted for 23% of the cases of COVID. There's some really good research around this. Dr. Rupa Myra and Raj Patel wrote this book on Inflamed, and they really argue that our health is profoundly influenced by social and economic conditions. They emphasize that injustices in our society can create, that they can emphasize injustices in society and create stress and inflammation in the body, leading to various health issues. The book traces historical roots of modern health disparities, the wealth gap, and really linking that between the connection of colonialism and capitalism. WEAll ambassador Diapolo speaks so eloquently on this. I put a quote in here from her. So to understand the flaws of GDP, we must first recognize its ahistorical nature and its failure to acknowledge the colonial context in which countries of global north have derived their wealth. So what is the solution to this? Well, involve people that have been oppressed in these societies to the table to create new frameworks that influence policies that better work to improve their health and well-being. And I think that New Zealand's tried to do a really good job of this. So they brought in Maori stakeholders to discuss the development of a framework that goes beyond GDP, so the Living Standards Framework, and how it could really improve their community well-being. And so they put, their goals and values at the center of this, which is interconnectedness of people, the environment, and spiritual being. And so, the framework really incorporates indicators that are meaningful to them, along with, cultural identity, connection to land, and community well-being. So in summary, justice and fairness should be at the heart of our economic system, but a significant wealth gap exists for people of color, and research has shown that racism and poverty contribute to a number of health issues. In New Zealand, they developed an economic framework in consultation with Indigenous people to create values and goals that support their local communities. So call to action, we need to adopt similar inclusive approaches, engaging marginalized communities or system-impacted communities to redesign our economic systems to ensure justice, fairness, and well-being of all citizens. And the last need here is participation. So I think we can all agree that citizens, really should be actively engaged in their communities and economic decisions. And we've seen this a lot in the media here. Here's some just top line headlines. Study, voters frustrated that their voices aren't heard. The European support for authoritarian grows as citizens feel unheard. Voter confidence at a record low. And actually, we came across this study which really validates this feeling that people have that what they want to see in policies actually isn't being implemented. So this study looked at 2,000 polls and surveys to understand what people thought about various policy changes. And they discovered that the average citizen's preference for a policy was actually less likely to result in the policy being implemented, which isn't the way this should go, compared to when special interest groups or economic elites were interested. So if we look at this, so specifically, here's sort of an example. If fewer than 20% of wealthy Americans supported a policy change, it only happened about 18% of the time. But when 80% of them were in support of it, the change ended up happening 45% of the time. So you can see the difference between economic elites' preferences, interest group alignments, and average citizens' preferences. So this shouldn't be happening. A solution to this is citizens' assemblies. And this is really a way of getting voices heard and creating policies that actually reflect what citizens want. So France held one on the Climate Convention for Climate. They selected 150 people at random, and they presented 149 proposals, and many of these proposals from the citizens were actually integrated into France's climate and resilience law. Now, some of them were rejected, but still, I think that's progress. And one of our favorite examples of citizens assemblies is actually in Belgium, Eastern Belgium. They have a permanent citizens assembly where they're ongoing, invited at random to take part in a panel 3 months at a time, and then the panel deliberates on a topic, and then they make recommendations which Parliament must debate. So yeah, we thought that's a great example. So in summary, everyone should have a say in the decisions that affect their lives. But too often, policy is made with little input from citizens, leading to disenfranchisement and less effective policies. All over the world, citizen assemblies are used to increase public participation in policymaking, like in Eastern Belgium, the permanent assembly that I mentioned, which make recommendations and Parliament has to debate. So then our call to action is ensuring citizens' voices are heard is achievable through citizens assemblies. This approach can help reshape our economic policies so that they don't just benefit a few people, they really benefit everyone and also have a positive impact on the environment. So those are our 5 needs. We also have another sort of framework that we thought might help people as well. Maybe you've heard of it before, but it's called our 4 Ps. So these are a macro way of policies and practices to sort of summarize how we get to a well-being economy. For example, we have pre-distribution. So we want to pre-distribute power, wealth, time, and income. So an example of this might be social enterprises and businesses being owned by their workers, community wealth building, and living wages. Purpose. So we want to shift the purpose of the economy to deliver human and ecological well-being. So an example of this is adopting, again, a wider suite of measures that go beyond GDP and visionary national development plans. Prevention. So we want to adopt preventative measures that stop harm from happening in the first place. So that could be outcome budgeting or circular production and consumption. And then lastly, people powered. So an example of this could be citizens assemblies and participatory budgeting. So now I'm just going to go into some of the other policy recommendations that we have. As you noticed in the presentation, earlier in the presentation, I kind of mentioned some of these, but we'll share this in the follow-up email as well. But yeah, this is sort of a new resource that we've created and hopes to give you some ideas of different policy recommendations you can use to work towards a well-being economy. So obviously the first is going to be well-being economy frameworks. So this is shifting from GDP growth to well-being for all of us to live on a healthier planet, using well-being frameworks and dashboards for policy development, incorporate local and national participatory processes to define well-being goals as well, like we saw with the Maori, who had a hand in the New Zealand framework. So the planetary health, actually one thing I want to mention just quickly, that's au courant, but the UN Summit of the Future is coming up at the end of September, and we don't want to celebrate, but we're kind of excited about the fact that in their declaration, they have language around going beyond GDP. So that's kind of exciting, and we're going to be running a campaign that hopes to push for implementation around that. So the second is planetary health and regeneration of nature. So we want to transition to a decarbonized, circular, and regenerative economy. Obviously create policies that eliminate waste, encourage reuse, get rid of planned obsolescence, implement true cost accounting, and transition to renewable energy, and recognize there's a lot of movement around this in the ecocide law that recognize the rights of nature in policy and legal frameworks and consider ecocide legislation. Comprehensive progressive tax reform. So as we mentioned earlier, inequality is really out of control, and the data shows countries that are more equal, they fare better. So we want to make sure that we're reforming tax systems to include wealth and financial tax transfers, address tax evasion, use fiscal incentives for sustainable business and public procurement, raise revenue from taxing the wealthiest people and windfall profits of large corporations, create social or citizen wealth funds for universal basic income and services. And then work and care. So we have done a lot this year around the care economy, if you've been following us on social media, but actually 65% of women's working hours globally are in unpaid care. And as Oxfam puts it, our economy, can be seen in the eyes of in a man's economy. So we need to be making sure that we're supporting people who are unpaid, but actually contributing to the well-being of people in society. So we really want to adjust the gender gap and power balances through public health and education, ensure fair wages, raise minimum wages, and support a universal basic dividend, reduce working week to 32 hours without reducing pay. And then lastly, so participatory governments for future generations, implement long-term planning, citizen participation. As we saw, this has really worked in Belgium, in France, and many actually happened in the UK as well. So recognize the rights of future generations to social and ecological well-being, integrate Indigenous perspectives into decision-making, and establish, this is why Wales is the best, we think one of the best examples, but establish future generations legislation. So make sure that that's legislated so for sustainable and long-term impact. And that's it. And we're happy to share some of those resources as well. And yeah, one other thing I'd just like to say is we are going to be having a narrative 101. So just like the basics of Wellbeing Economy in October, and in October as well, my co-lead Francis is going to be digging more into some of the framing that I mentioned, and looking at how we can, if there's something that comes up, how we can respond and debate things, and different examples of framing that we can use from that research. So. Yeah, I hope that was helpful, and I can't wait to hear any comments or questions that are in the chat.
Yes. So yeah, this is our chance to chat. We've got 15 minutes to have a discussion, or for you to share your thoughts, because I know that was a lot of information, really incredible information. So we want to know how it's landing for you, kind of what have you picked up that's like, yeah, interesting for you to move forward with. Do you have questions? Do you want to provoke some thought or discussion around something? So we are opening the floor for you to share your thoughts. And we love community at WEAll, so just feel free to pop up your hand. You can use the little button at the bottom of your screen. And yeah, over to you. I'm seeing some things in the chat as well, but let's start with Fabio as we get into more in the chat. I think Tarsi's comment can come in after Fabio. Go ahead, Fabio.
Thank you very much. That was really helpful, particularly like the whole thing around the framing and how to frame the conversation and introduce the various bits of the narrative. So I'm based in Scotland. Well, Edward and I are based in Scotland, in Murray, and we are kind of working on supporting community-led action that kind of puts a pressure on and gives ideally inspiration, a mandate, or cover for politicians to make those policy changes that you're mentioning. So we really have to reflect on the presentation, because our call to action is actually do something that then puts pressure rather than ask for a policy thing. But we'll definitely continue to work with you. We worked with, Wellbeing Economy Alliance Scotland to get a community-led vision for Murray that sets a whole framework of what community-led action can do to catalyze that move. And it's really helpful to have a way of introducing the conversation. We do that everywhere we go, make ourselves possibly quite unpopular with some that like business as usual, but that's not going to stop us. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great. So excited to hear about the work you're doing there. Thank you for that. Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. And then
Thank
we'll
you.
get to some of the comments in the chat.
Can I start, or would you like to continue with a? Okay, thank you. So, hi from The Hague. My name is Radmila. I'm affiliated with the American School of The Hague. So it's a primary, middle, and high school. And I would like to know whether you're interested in engaging with schools education. I'm in charge and affiliated with a school in terms of enrichment. So the programs that bring in the beautiful knowledge that you have shared. So I was wondering whether you have done already something like that and whether you would be interested in engaging.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's been on our list, and I think some people in our policy space have been working with different, I know, universities and institutions, but I think high school is a great place for us to start that as well. And Totally probably knows this better, but I know there's some university courses that are specifically around well-being economies as well, and we've been working with them. But yeah, great point. We're happy to connect and share some resources and continue that conversation, because yeah, it starts at that level, right? Of
Exactly.
Yeah,
Precisely. I mean, when we come to the age, which is the university age, my fear is that, it's better to start earlier.
Better to start early. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kate. It was wonderful.
No,
Thank you.
totally.
I'm
Good call.
happy to keep in touch with you all.
For sure. Yeah, I'll put my email here too if anyone wants to email me. But
Well, I
you
have
email
already
me here and we
shared
can.
information with, how do I pronounce your name?
Tobile.
Tobile. Yeah.
Is it
So,
my name? Yeah.
yeah. So I'm going to respond and you will have my email address.
Brilliant. Thank you. I also wanted to share on that point, we'll end with it around WEAll voices, and we want to also provide you and equip you with the tools to be able to share this narrative and a lot of these points in your own contexts, so that this movement can grow and be passed on through you as well. So we're happy to obviously present, but we actually also want to equip people with more tools in order to do so.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up and to feed you back with more information that many high schools really have their SDGs economies, their focus on sustainability and service learning. So there is lots of going on already. So it wouldn't be a context that you're bringing as something novel. It's only going to be a context that is going to encourage students to think in the frame that you have been sharing.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Be great.
Amazing.
So let's go to Doyen, because I saw you didn't have a virtual hand, but a physical hand there. And then we'll go to Philippa. No, it's perfect. At least we saw it.
I was just wondering, great presentation, by the way. This is my first time talking about attending a wellbeing economy. What would the future look like what would the future look like in GDP? How would that look differently? Have you done future mapping of it? What if we look at GDP, if most countries follow that model, how would it look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that's important to bring into your narratives and your framing when you're presenting this and letting people know, this is possible. And that's why I like to bring in sort of the case studies around Wales and Finland and Iceland, because they're not perfect well-being economies, but they show us some well-being economies in action. So yeah, in Iceland, for example, they were able to create more policies that allowed for affordable housing, or in Wales, instead of prioritizing short-term growth, they wanted to protect the environment and rejected some plans for highways. So yeah, we really see it as a world where people and nature are thriving, and we're making those decisions with citizens' assemblies and with citizens' input as well, because values and needs vary based on different countries. So if you, if that's taken into consideration when developing policies, I think that could really help. But yeah, I think that some of these well-being economy examples can be sort of a window into, oh, there's a little bit of what that future could look like. Again, not all of them are perfect, but yeah, great question.
Thank you.
I think you're on mute, Toby Love, but I read your lips. I think you're coming to me.
Thanks, Philippa.
Hi there. I spent 33 years in the NHS as a general and then breast cancer surgeon, and the last 9 years as a member of Parliament at Westminster. And certainly I found as I got older, it's almost like a drone zooming out, that when you're busy with patients, you're just dealing with the problem in front of you. As you get older and zoom out, you realize you're just bailing out a boat that's got a hole in it. And unless you have radical change, you're never going to stop that. So we often talk in health about prevention, and we mean stopping smoking, lose weight, give up alcohol, cut drugs. But actually health, genuine health, as opposed to illness, which is what the NHS does, is all the things at the beginning of your life. You know, how healthy was your mother? What's the air like you breathe? The housing you talk about, nutrition. And unless we can turn that round, we are just constantly going to be having, exactly as you highlighted, shorter, miserable lives for so many people. And I'm sure, just following on from Doyen's point, looking at the spirit level and looking at the most effective economies in the world, they actually are the ones that are more equal, including some of the Scandinavian economies, where quality of life is put much higher than simply exploiting people and planet. And so I wonder whether finding the data that Doyen's talking about might actually help us drag the Luddites to see that investing in every citizen reaching their full potential gives you a thriving economy, not an endlessly growing economy, but a sustainable and successful economy. So I wonder whether trying to, it's not, here's the real economy, which is tough, and then here's all this soft stuff we want to add on the side, but actually investing in people will make you more successful. And I just wonder whether that kind of research could help us drag the hard GDPers to the table.
Yeah, no, sorry, I tried to bring some of that health data into the presentation using Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett's point, and we often use that in our narrative conversations. And I mean, there's more that we definitely want to do and focus on health. We launched a report a few years ago, and it was super cool, and it was done partly by some of our members and WEAll, and it was looking at countries that had a well-being economy framework during COVID versus those that didn't. And they found that countries like Bhutan, New Zealand, Finland, actually at the end of COVID fared better from an economic perspective and a health perspective than those like Italy or other countries that focused on growth. So we love that hard data. We have resources on that, and we're always looking for more. But great point.
Yes, let's go to Margot.
Hello. I just wanted to encourage people. I am in Wales, and we know that the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act matters a lot, but it's 10 years, almost 10 years since it's been in place. And you can't let the perfect get in the way of the good enough. Legislation isn't everything. What we found that gave people optimism and confidence were examples of grassroots projects all over the size of Wales, especially from civil society and from regenerative businesses like B Corps. we're having our first face-to-face conference in November. And in a way, it will be extremely interesting to try to bring together the people who are doing the grassroots projects, really changing things about inequality and the value system at the grassroots, when the legislators sort of think they've done the job by making the public bodies responsible, but that doesn't win everybody else. For example, if you look at the social media response to the 20-mile-per-hour limit or the cancellation of the M4 motorway, you will find a very large percentage of negative feedback, as well as very good actual statistical outcome results on lower deaths and fewer accidents. So you have to win the hearts and minds as well as get the legislation in there. So for anybody who can't get the legislation in first, don't fret, because actually action with civil society and especially with regenerative businesses will make an enormous difference. Okay.
Love that. Thanks for that bit of hope. Appreciate that, Marco. Simon.
Yeah, Simon, I think that's the last one.
Yeah, I was just holding off to see if anyone else wanted to come in, but wonderful presentation, Kate. Thanks for that. And I've been trying to talk about the wellbeing economy for a while now, but you learn new things, new angles and new stories to tell as well all the time. I think that's the sort of the versatility of it. But just one comment I think is important to make is that the needs and the P's, the 4 P's, we have to look at in a kind of an interconnected, interdisciplinary way. It's not like a suite of policy options that you choose one thing from. They are all interconnected. As the multidimensional crisis is interconnected, you can't address climate change without addressing inequality. You can't address poverty without addressing inequality. You can't move towards a caring society without a feminist perspective. And in the same way that the field of human rights is interdisciplinary, I think we need to look at this suite from a holistic perspective and an interconnected perspective. That was just a reaction to that. Wonderful to have that, and I can tell some stories about Mexico and how but there's no time for that.
Thanks, Simon. Oh, I think you're muted, Topole.
Why do I keep my computer slow? Sorry. But thank you so much for all those incredible comments and questions. There is so much in the chat. I wish we could unpack all those questions that are there and comments. I think like all of them warrant their own kind of WEAll talk as well, some of them. And so we'd love to continue this conversation. So please know that we will be drawing on what's in the chat to kind of inform further discussion. Like, we're not going to just ignore that. It really helps. And also to further our discussions around the next presentation on what is a wellbeing economy. But I do want to recommend that if you aren't part of WEAll as a member, these are the very kinds of discussions that we also have. If it's health and a wellbeing economy, we have a working group speaking on preventative measures and narratives that we can kind of bring into the healthcare industry. So these topics, a lot of the things that you've mentioned in the chat are things that we're unpacking maybe in smaller groups. We have a Beyond GDP working group. So we'd love to kind of encourage you to be part of the membership so that we can continue to have these discussions. But I also want to hand over to Kate to say, first of all, thank you so much. That was incredible. It's so much to pack in such a short time. So I think we should also think about extending this a little bit longer. But yeah, I know you also want to share a little bit about WEAll Voices and next steps. So I'm going to pop that into the chat while you share.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I had that there too. Yeah, we're starting a group called WEAll Voices, and so it's a group that where we're focused on talking about narrative change. And so we're going to be keeping you up to date with the different workshops that we're having, but we'll also be meeting just that specific group to talk about different tactics or communication strategies and new research and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no worries, totally. I've got the form here. I can, if you guys want to, I've added it here, but if you want to join it, please feel free. And we also have an online community space where you can chat there too. So thank you guys. Really appreciate everyone coming and all of your questions and yeah, experiences and comments. So appreciate everyone. Thank you. And thank you, Toble, for hosting. Such an amazing host as always.
No, thank you. Yeah. We really appreciate you being here. And I also want to say the next WEAll talk is on the 9th of September. It is around defining African liberation. So one of the comments in the chat is, how do you make this more radical for local context, something along those lines. We do have hubs and various local expressions of this wellbeing economy. One of them being the African liberation work and movement that's happening in South Africa and Southern Africa. So if you want to hear kind of local interpretations of this wellbeing economy framing, I really encourage you to join that. And I'll also pop the registration link in the chat. But cool, thank you for being with us. Okay, copied. And I'm posting. I have too many tabs open, so my thing is very slow. Here we go. So that's the next WEAll talk if you're wanting to register for that. But lovely to see everybody. Great to see you all. And yeah, thank you so much for being part of this movement.
Everyone, thanks, Toble. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Let me
Thanks, guys.
stop recording there.